productivity, winning strategies, and aligning employer-employee goals. If this sounds like something your business could use more of, then you've come to the right place. The Business Mechanic Show with your host, Vaughn Sigmund. Let Vaughn show you how to develop, improve, and jumpstart your business. So now, please welcome the host of The Business Mechanic, Vaughn Sigmund.
Welcome to The Business Mechanic Show. This is your host, Vaughn Sigmund, co-founder of Results Driven Leadership, where we give you and your team the knowledge, skills, and tools to make you awesome successes. We're all former executives. We don't teach with any theory. We've been there, we've done that, and we'll give you what you need, no matter whether you're just starting out or you've been in business for years. So let's get right into today's topic. We're going to talk about if you want to succeed, you need to lead with your ears. So what does all that mean? I couldn't figure it out, so I had to bring in a couple of my compadres here. We've got Eric Van Doren, which you all have heard a couple times. Say hello, Eric Van Doren.
Hello, team.
And John Karwacki, the latest member of the RDL team. Say hello, John Karwacki from Portland, Maine.
Hello, listeners. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad you're here too. As you all can see, the RDL team continues to grow, and we appreciate all the support you all are giving us out there to allow us to do. The three of us last week, here's the history of this discussion today. It's going to be a little different type of podcast, but the three of us last week, we're talking about something we're talking all the time. But we started comparing notes on the businesses we worked with in the past that had failed. And what was the commonalities? And before we got on today, gentlemen, I didn't tell you this. I did a little research via ChatGPT, my favorite tool in the world. I should start charging a sponsorship for that. But I went and did an exhaustive search. Just kidding, on ChatGPT, took about 7 seconds, and asked why most companies, in particular, we're all experts on the retail side, but why most companies fail. And here's the commonalities: changing customer preference, competition, changing consumer experience, and over expansion. So what we're going to talk about today is why is it that some companies fall prey to this, and why some companies never succumb to competition, changing customer preferences, the changing experience that customers want. And so why do companies continue to succeed when all these are out there? These changes in competition and preference are happening all the time. Why do some succeed and many fail? In fact, I was sharing with you guys, my history as a retailer is paved with a graveyard of failed retailers. And there's two in my 40 plus year career that's still in business. And I guess I'd worked for 10 or 12 in all those years. You gentlemen worked with me at one of those, Phillips Van Heusen. And John, I'm going to let you kick things off. Here's what got me fascinated and motivated us to have this story today. Tell me a story from your experience in the stores that you were hearing day in and day out, and why in the world things didn't change to keep them going.
The stores that I worked with, okay, I'll talk about GH Bass, Van Heusen, Izod. What happened over the course of the years is that very often the decisions, whether it was the direction of marketing, whether it's direction of product, it was made in a vacuum. Okay, so it was made in the home office. All right, and folks really listened to a lot of their metrics, numbers, reporting, all that sort of thing, versus going out and really listening to what the people in the stores said they needed, or giving the people what they said they needed to sell. And I think that, call it playing safe, call it trusting, not necessarily trusting in your salespeople and the people in the trenches. I think it really was a downfall because it held us back from making decisions and evolving. Okay, the marketplace was changing. And I think Eric, you'd agree with me. There's just tons of product that we asked for time and time again, and whether it was for the area it was selling for, whether it was a fashion trend that was going on, like skinny men's slim fit pants and that sort of thing, we were behind the curve on that. And when we finally made the decision, and again through changes in management and leadership, made the decision to evolve, it was right when the pandemic hit. So it was like we never had the chance to see those decisions and changes come to fruition. So to me, looking back at that, that's a tough pill to swallow, because I felt like we were right, and we finally people listened to the guys in the field, and I felt like we had an ear there towards the end with the leadership, but we were never able to see it come to fruition. Eric, would you agree with that? Or
Yeah, I think there was I've come from the West Coast, and our company was an East Coast driven company. And for me, I saw it, and I know you saw it too, because you're a very active person, John. It was really a cultural revolution of casual compared to dress. And I think there's a piece there that was happening that we would talk about it, and we would continue to say, hey, this is out there in the world. There's denim, there's 5-pocket. I'm talking about pants here, and any kind of casual goods that people were wearing in-house. This is probably 10 years ago, prior to the Fridays and all the casual Fridays. Before that, people were wearing button-downs, suits, et cetera, but that was changing so rapidly, especially in California, where all I saw was either polos or denim in a very casual approach. And that's people on the ground, which was us. And I think that's a hard thing to do when the numbers, or as you say, the metrics, John, was saying otherwise. I guess sales, because is it the cart before the horse, before the chicken, that kind of thing.
And Eric, that's a great point. My thought is, again, when you're making decisions only with reporting, if you never have the goods to sell, guess what? They're never going to show that you can sell them. So I think that a lot of times it's the self-fulfilling prophecy when you don't put a product or test the limits. Okay, expand your parameters, see what you can push the limit within how far the envelope before you say you can't sell a slim fit pant. If you never try selling one, guess what? You'll never sell one. So
yeah, another example of that was really hilarious. 10, 15 years ago, when the hoodie craze was in. I know this sounds crazy. We're in the business of fashion, and hoodies was the biggest thing. And I remember going out with a gentleman shopping from the corporate office, and we went into a very, very high-end place, Burberry, say a name. And we were talking about hoodies, and he's like, nobody has hoodies. And we looked in, and there was Burberry had a hoodie. And he goes, yeah, got it. And eventually, and he did listen, this is back in the Bass days. So we started doing hoodies, not to the same degree, but that's the kind of aspect where you see something and then you react to it quickly. As you go back in the day, it took sometimes 6 months, John or Vaughn, or 12 months to turn around an item that you saw to go forward. But then it turned into fashion, and it turned into 6 weeks to 12, 6 weeks to 8 to 9 weeks to turn around fast fashion like H&M.
Right. Speed to market.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so speed to market, that's a great term. And so taking this outside of just retail, I think what I'm taking away from your discussion is there was bottom up conversation that was sharing what's going on here. Our metrics are down. We're declining in business. We're declining in customer traffic. Here's what we think it is. It took them months to finally come out and do their discovery to determine whether that was fact or not. And then once they determined that, oh, you guys are right, to make the change,
right,
the ship had sailed. And you expand that just out of retail, that could happen to almost any organization because the landscape changes. And Eric, it could happen in the construction business. It could happen in the software business. I'm looking to buy a software company right now, and they're ahead of time. They're doing really well, slightly ahead of where the competition is, but they're not prepared. They don't have any plan B or C of new product launches. They're not looking at what the future is going to bring, which to me devalues the investment I would make in that organization, because as the new owner of the company, I would have to invest in the R&D, and I may be wrong. I don't have 10 years of experience with this. I'm starting from a dead stop. And so business owners, if you're thinking about ever selling your business, you've got to always be listening. And in this case, the point is you all were taking this to the corporate office because your people were telling you this, right?
Daily.
And they're the ones that talk to the customer every day. They're the ones that were in the outlet malls every day. They saw what was going on and conveyed it to you because that was your role. You conveyed it upwards, which was your role, but it fell on deaf ears because they were smarter than you or did not value the input you have. And this whole concept of collaborating with your employees includes listening to how we need to stay ahead of the competition, what's happening with consumers, our customers, how's the landscape changing, what do we need to do to be prepared for that? And if you're not listening, you're dying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And nowadays things are changing so fast. Every day they're changing. And if you're looking at what you did last year, you're looking in the rear view mirror, guess what? You're going to wipe out. You can't drive your car that way.
John, and you just hit a great point. And you early in stages working with us haven't the exposure that I've had doing this for a decade. How many times I've walked into a business, said, okay, I know where you are, where are you going? Because what got you here ain't going to get you there. What are you looking at? What's your innovation? What's your change? What's your future look like? And they're caught flat-footed with no answer almost 100% of the time. In fact, if they were somebody that was that advanced, that forward-looking, they wouldn't be bringing me into the organization. These people are struggling. They know they've got a challenge. They know they got a problem. They can't solve it themselves. They bring one of us in, and we look at it people, product, process. And generally it's a people problem, but part of the people problem is you're not listening to them.
Bingo. Bingo. I'll tell you a funny story. And I remember this like yesterday. I remember being a sales associate in a store, and the big boss came to visit. Okay. So this is a regional manager, someone from the office came. They were important though. That's all I knew. And I was a young guy just starting off, and I ended up being a vice president with the company. So I think I did okay. But the bottom line was, person came in, never said a word to anybody. And we all had ideas. There's things that we wanted, things that we knew could propel that business, make sales better, make profits better, all those things. And we had some questions. The guy he never talked to anybody but the manager. And there was stuff going on too that I don't know. But at the end of the day, he walked out of the store without information that could have made him made better decisions. And I remembered that. I took it away. I said, look, if I ever get to the point where I'm the big boss, whatever, I'm the big boss, I thought I was, I'm going to talk to everybody, because I don't care if it's the stock boy, because a lot of times the stock boy is going to tell you stuff that, the manager's going to tell you what you want to hear. Okay. But the stock boy, folks, and this for the listeners out there, if you want to really know what's going on, talk to the stock boy. Okay. Or stock person, because they'll tell you what's really going on in the store. You'll learn so much more than just talking to the manager, because they're just going to give you they think you. That's just my 2 cents. And again, you'll learn things about product. You'll learn things about your operations. You'll learn things about your store.
And to that point, again, taking it out of retail.
Yeah.
If I run an aerospace company, I may not have a stock boy, but I've got somebody that's working in a bin somewhere that is staying ahead of my parts. I've got to have components to put onto whatever I'm building.
Right.
I've got production people who are putting this stuff together that are drawing from the parts bin. And if I'm looking at productivity numbers and I know they can be better, I don't have the answer. They have the friggin' answer.
That's right.
Go talk to them. If I own a plumbing company and I've got plumbers out in vans and they're driving from hell and yonder back and forth all day, all that downtime and not structuring their routes properly is losing you business. And if you went to the plumbers, the first thing they complain about? Why am I driving 60 miles this way, 30 miles that way, 24 miles this way, when my partner is driving in between all these during all, there's got to be a way to figure this out. And you know what? There is, but the owner doesn't listen because that's the way I've always done it. Eric, you've got some experience with that.
Yeah, you name it. It could be, I'll call it construction time. How about that? I think there's a piece there. I was recently involved in construction and learning the business on the fly, so to speak, and noticing you set a contract out to be set by a certain date where something needs to be built, let's say an apartment complex. And you have these times, dates that you've signed up, say you got 10 days to do, let's say you got 18 months to do a construction site and you've got 10 days of freedom. That's it. It's a very tight schedule. And at the same time this is going on, you have issues of parts. You've been dealing with the same vendor that you've always dealt with forever because all you've done, this is what you've always done. Point. I've gone to this person all the time, yet his prices are, and you've already made your bid. And the more you do that, the less profit you're going to have. So in turn, we went back and said, let's go find out other people. We need to call Malaysia. We had issues in China. We had issues in Vietnam. Vietnam was a big thing for cabinet making. And we went, and it actually saved us money at the end of the day and made us in time to make sure we did that. But at the beginning of it, we were in trouble, to be truthful, because we were sticking what we always did in that aspect of how much things cost. That's just one aspect of it, not to mention hiring people and all that stuff. But
and it's listen to you people, not only from what the customers are saying, but they have ideas. You've got some brilliant, smart, sharp people working for you. You may not know it, but you've got some really smart people working for you. I was, before we got on, I was so excited about doing this. I was sharing with you all about the interview I saw with the founder of Kinko's, who sold to FedEx for $1.6 billion. And what made that company successful? Why were you successful? And one of the things that he shared was, listen, I spent 80-90% of my time on the road, just visiting stores. I had executives back in the home office that dealt with all the details. That wasn't what I did well. What I did well was the big pictures. I was looking for ways to expand. I was looking for new locations. I was looking for opportunities to grow the company, but both from a store count standpoint, but from a product standpoint, where were the next ideas coming from? And the interviewer said, what's the difference between a good store and a bad store? And the founder said, the manager. He said, I didn't visit bad stores, that I wasn't going to learn anything from them. Again, I paid executives to worry about that. We had regional managers had to worry about that, but I was looking for how to grow the company. So he says, I would walk into my best stores, talk to my best managers, and guess what? My best ideas came from them because I don't know it all. And he talks about a time that he walked into a store in Austin, Texas, really good store, growing like crazy. He walks in, he sees all these smiling faces and happy people and happy customers. And he's talking to the manager and looks on the back wall and he sees this Kinko branded calendar. And he says, what's that? And he says, oh, that was an idea I had last year. I took some photos. I took it went onto our printer, turned those into calendars, spiral bound them, and started selling them for $10 each. And we sell 60, 70 of those every week. And the founder says, oh, we don't have calendars as part of our product mix. He goes back, taking one of these calendars and throws it at a product designer. And said, I didn't throw it. Those are my words. He handed it to a product designer and says, I want that in every store in 90 days. However, you got to get this out to stores, get it out there. And he says, that was just an $8 million idea. But he never would have known it unless he was asking and listen. And we're going to talk about this for a minute. I've worked with both of you. John and I go back a number of decades. In fact, that chain he was talking about earlier was the same chain he and I worked with together. I wasn't the big boss at the time,
Yeah, you were the big boss.
but the
Not that
difference between a good manager and a bad manager, we had good managers and bad leaders in that organization, as did Eric. But one of the hallmarks and I ask this question in almost every interview, who's the best boss you ever had? He listened to me is almost 100% of the time. One of the responses I hear back is, yeah, he listened to me. My opinions counted. He sought my expertise. And John, you and I shared some great bosses, some that you were still very familiar with, and I know and love them to death as well. But describe, we had some of the, you had that guy, I know exactly who you're talking about, and I'll say his name, Bill Fire.
Yeah.
And Bill Fire wouldn't talk to anybody in a store. But then later, Joe Gaida came along, and I remember visits with Joe Gaida, and then Dan Reardon replaced Joe Gaida, and they spent half of their visits doing what in stores, John?
Talking to people. They were talking to people, asking questions, and it wasn't always just the store manager. I really took away something from that. It said that they valued people, not just as by the title. And I thought that was tremendous, as well as all the other things that came along with that, the training. And you knew that they valued you because they invested in you, invested in your time. But it was always great to see them writing those things down. And sometimes you'd see those changes happen, those recommendations would actually come to fruition. And he said, you know what, we're making a difference. And for the people in the team, I got to tell you, that makes such a big impact on them and makes them feel so valued. And I think any of the leaders here listening, you can always benefit. You want to be a great leader, listen to your people. They're going to have some ideas that are better than yours. I hate to say it, but and Vaughn, you said it earlier, you're not always the smartest guy about every topic, but they're going to have some great ideas that can propel your business. And when they see that, they become so invested. When they see that their ideas are being valued and some of them are actually being used, wow, how powerful is that?
Yeah, it absolutely helps us to add on to that. There's a retention piece that's sometimes to be wary in this day and age of hopping for the next dollar.
Yeah.
And I think when you have those conversations individually with people, whatever level they are, when you're in the store or in the actual manufacturing plant or in a marketing meeting or wherever you are, when that idea comes to fruition, like you said, I think there is something about retention that allows you to build a culture that you have. And I think we did a really good job in our aspect, because I know we had a time that we wanted to keep things when we had all these metrics flying around, all these numbers and computer this and graphic this and CRM that. And I remember this meeting vividly. And I know we were sitting with us, John and you, another gentleman, and we were saying, how do we do this? And we kept on saying, we got to make sure sophistication, we need to make it simple for everybody to remember this. And I'd love for you to tell the story, John, if you could.
I'll tell you, you got a minute for a story, Vaughn?
Sure.
I think it's a pretty good one. It's worthwhile. I think it was 2013, 2014. Okay. PVH had just sold GH Bass. Okay. So we'd worked for Bass. You and I had worked there since the 80s. I think that's when we met in the 80s. Can I say that? And the PVH had sold Bass to another corporation. And we were sitting in a room. It was my supervisor, myself, and another regional manager. And we were handed this deck, one of the biggest divisions. We managed 4 brands and it was down to 1. Okay. Because 2, actually, it was Van Heusen and ISOT. And at the time, I remember looking at my boss and saying, you know what, if we don't get things turned around, if we get a little spring in people's step and show some results, we're going to be the next one's gone. And so it was pretty apparent at that point, it was a sink or swim. We'd lived in a bubble for years where we felt we were invulnerable. PVH, big corporation, they'd always have your back. But you know what? I think it gets to a point with any corporation, they got to keep any public company, they got to keep the shareholders happy and the stock price up. So we decided, and to Eric's point, we had lots of metrics. I remember going to stores and we had a supervisor, and we won't get into that person's name, but they were very big on all these metrics. So they would expect people to know, I don't know, a dozen different numbers. And they'd want to know the average unit cost and what was the average selling cost per hour and all these things. And I remember walking in stores and managers would write it on their hand. They'd be flipping it over and saying that our average unit retail is, and they don't even know what the heck they're talking about. I said, do you know what that means? Why do we care? So anyways, to make a long story short, we decided in a heated discussion saying, look, we need to survive. So what's important? So we know we've got a sales problem. So we've got a top line sales problem. We've got a conversion problem, okay, of customers coming in the door. And the last thing is we had a traffic problem. So you know what? Sales are sales, but conversion really propels sales. Okay, so that was the biggest thing that we wanted to say is that, number one is you got to make your sales. If you're a store manager, you got to know what the plan is. Okay. And guess what? Everybody on the team, okay, even that stock boy, they need to know what the sales plan is. In addition, we got to have a conversion goal for every single store with a little bit of a push goal so that they're trying to improve that conversion. Okay. So again, that'll help the sales. And the last thing was, well, traffic, you know what? What can you do in an outlet mall? We were an outlet-based industry. You could put a sign in the window. We did some emails and things that again, we didn't control that, but we had a little influence. But at the end of the day, we said, you know what? The more people we could have on our email capture, and the more people we're communicating those emails to, that's going to make traffic get better. So we really pushed to sign up every single customer. And at the end of the day, we created some reports that would actually hold people accountable for their own results in all of those capacities. But we got to the point where and you talk a lot about aligning employers and employee goals. Okay. We were really clear that there were three things you needed to know about. We call them the pillars, our three pillars. I guess I can say that. So we had the three pillars of our business. It was sales, it was conversion, and it was reward signups. In every single associate in the field. Okay. So we had, 3,000 associates. They all knew if somebody called up and said, hey, Vaughn, what are your pillar goals? And they'd get Sally part-timer. She knew what they were. Okay. So we asked them, first thing we asked them every single visit, we'd asked everybody. And I always say as a leader, what you make important, that's what's going to be important to your folks. Okay. So if you're talking about 20 different things and they can't focus on any of them, guess what? Nothing's important. They're all the same level. But when you say there's three things that you got to just come through on these three things, Eric, and we'll be best friends: sales, conversion, rewards. You come through on those, you're good with me. And we really built a whole culture around that I'm really proud of. And again, it was adopted by the big guys because I think they felt like, hey, if these guys got some ideas, we better start listening. It's time to listen up because things aren't going well. And we were able to have comp increases, I would say 6-7 years in a row. We comp on top of comp on top of comp. And we built this whole culture that I was really proud of. And I hate to say that COVID had a bad influence on the outcome, but we had a good thing going for a 10-year run. And I felt, again, us as a team, we built that.
But to put your point real quick, I just want to finish this one point. That idea, the pillar idea of the name and those type of metrics actually came from where, John?
Came from conversation.
Yeah, conversation manager. I think it was in Jersey or something.
Yeah, in Florida. That I had a conversation with someone, brought it back. People didn't like that originally, but you know what? It lasted. It had staying power, and it resonated. The thing is, it resonated with people. And to Eric's point, it was simple. It was understandable. Everybody could understand it and get behind it. They had all kinds of handmade pillar posters that they'd make in their back rooms and stuff. They were proud as hell of that stuff. I think there's probably some tattoos out there. I don't know, but I'm not showing mine today. But
I mean, I want to not skip over the fact that once you got focused on the three components, the three pillars, sales improvement happened, which goes back to the old business saying, and you said it, I'm going to say it in a different way in a Southern accent, is what gets talked about gets improved. That's an old business saying.
Yeah.
That was just proof of that. And then I was taking notes feverishly as you two were talking, because here's the other thing. Bad numbers are not a reflection on bad people.
No.
And in fact, if you go to your people and you ask them why the numbers are bad, they generally have the answer or have some answers. And so if you don't ask, you'll never know. Unfortunately, many leaders, many managers, many business owners never friggin' ask. I'm just going to put my money where my mouth is. I learned from the Ted Boswells and the Larry Painters and the Joe Guidas and the Dan Reardons how to do this. It was ingrained in my and yours and Eric's DNA to go to the people and find out what's going on. They've got the answers. And when I was with CarMax, when I had a problem, I put a team of employees on it to fix it and to stay on top of the competition, to understand why my numbers were bad in certain areas. I went to the people. I didn't have the answers. I had perceptions, but I didn't have the absolute truth. And I'll give you a great example of this. Francis Nyland Kinde. This guy will go down in the history of my memory. He was a part-time salesperson in my store in Ontario, California. I had a monthly conference call with a group of 10 or 12 sales consultants. Now, let me just talk about, I was one step away from the CEO. I was talking to sales consultants who I had a regional manager below me, a general manager, a sales manager, and then I'm talking 4 levels, 5 levels down from my position. I had a conference call with salespeople every single month, a group of 10 or 12 of them. I had a conference call with buyers once a month. I had a conference call with business office, technicians, service writers. Those were the people that actually knew what the F was going on out there. And I had this group of salespeople on it. It just so happens because we were doing so much good with this approach to managing our stores that my boss was on this conference call to listen in to see what this magic was, just like the magic you created, John, where all of a sudden we were doubling, tripling every other region's comp sales improvement month after month. We were kicking everybody's ass. That wasn't Vaughn. It's what Vaughn got out of his people, because Vaughn isn't so stupid that he thinks he knows everything. I don't. So this conference call, 10 or 12 salespeople, just so happens my boss, Dan, was on the phone with me. And we were talking about what was a really bad number. CarMax spent hundreds of millions of dollars transferring cars from location to location from the request of a customer. In fact, I had on any given day, 300 cars on the back of a transport truck running somewhere up and down the freeways here in California, taking cars from one location to another for free, for a customer's free request. Now, I won't bore you with why that was still okay. We'd spend millions of dollars doing that. But the problem is that these cars didn't always sell. In fact, they sold at a very low conversion. Maybe 15 to 20% of those cars, once they got there, the customer asked for it, they get to the location, we'd never see the customer again, right? So and I'm asking the salespeople, what the hell, what can we do to improve that conversion? You talked about conversion earlier. And Francis pops in and says, Vaughn, I just bought an iPhone. And this was back in the mid 2000s. And he says, and when I ordered that iPhone from Apple, I got a notice that my order had been placed. I got a notice that when that order was being processed, I got a notice when that was being shipped and I had an estimated due date for that. I got a notice that it was going to be here tomorrow. I got a notice that it had been delivered. And he says, when we transfer a car, when a customer technically orders a car, all we do is send them a confirmation of the order. And then it may be a day or two later, we'll say, oh, it's here. They may be ready for it. They may not be ready for it, but there's no tie to that car and that customer, because here's the other thing we do. As soon as that car gets transferred for the customer, we pull the picture off the website and the customer never sees that car again. There's no emotional attachment to that product. And so they're still shopping, Vaughn. They're still out there looking for a car because they have no emotional attachment to that car. He says, why don't we figure out a way that when they order or request a transfer, we send them a photo and all the spec sheet on that car so they've got something. And then when it goes on the back of a truck, let them know your car's being processed, estimated delivery date's going to be tomorrow at noon, because we know our logistics department knew when that car was going to be there. When it gets there, we'll send a notice out to the customer and say, hey, your car's here, it's being prepared to show to you. And then we'd send them another note saying, hey, where your car's ready, when would you like to come down? Here's another picture of the car. And I thought, wow, that's a really good idea. And thank you, Francis, all the other salespeople on the calls. Yeah, that's a great, oh my God, that's a great idea. So everybody hangs up and I say, Dan, can we do that? And he says, oh, I'm going to find out. And I'm telling you, here's the other key part to it. You can listen to them all day. You got to do something about it.
Yeah.
You got to do something. You got to take action. Dan walks down the hall to the IT department and says, here's what we need to do. And they said, okay, within 30 days, we had this process change in place. And guess what happened? As soon as we implemented, in fact, I had the honor of my region that Francis's store got to test it. Then we spread it, we spread it, we spread it. It became eventually nationwide, but our conversion quadrupled. And by the way, that was a $500 million idea. 500 million. Now, everything we sold was $20,000, but that's still a crap ton of additional business that we never would have had I not been on a call with Francis Kende, more importantly, that we hadn't done something about it. Those answers are in your bad numbers. If you go friggin' talk to your people and then go do something about it. That's the art of collaboration and being able to involve others, because you don't know everything, I promise you. And if you can humble yourself, if your egotistical thought processes, and I'm talking about you and you know who I'm talking about. If you can pull out a piece of paper, go out, take them to lunch, have some conversations, ask them. And if you ask them frequently enough and you write it down, and then you either do something about it, or you go back and tell them why it can't work. You close the damn loop on it. Guess what happens? You can start getting ideas like crazy. You can put every suggestion box up in the damn break room you want to. You'll get crap out of it. You've got to go talk to your people. Do I feel passionate about that? You freaking A, I do, because it's one of the biggest tools the three of us ever used. The greatest leaders on the planet use it. Why aren't you, Mr. or Miss Listener? Why aren't you? Go do it. I'm going to step off my soapbox for a minute.
Hey, Vaughn, I just want to toss out here there too, again, because I know you're a big fan of the DISC assessment. And isn't it true most leaders are either high Ds or Is? And are those folks typically the best listeners out there, or is that something that is a high D? You need to put your ego and your self in check, understanding that maybe you're not the best listener all the time, and go into that listening mode to be able to process this information.
Exceptional question, John Karwacki. And I can tell you, Ds are the worst of all the DISC profiles for collaboration, for many different reasons. In fact, that'd be a great idea for a blog, but that you might see this week. But high Ds typically are very action oriented. They're very dominant. They're very controlling. Their rush to get things done does not always, in fact, rarely allows them the luxury of asking others. They do not involve others generally in their decision making. The smart ones have adapted. Like, I'm a very high D. I adapted. I figured out that because I'm competitive, I want to win. Taking the extra time to get the input of others actually makes me win more. It's worth the few extra minutes or hours, whatever it takes, to get all the information I can to make really good decisions. It takes the pressure off of me. And you talked about retention earlier. They're so friggin' proud that they had a say in that. Oh my God, they'll never leave you, because they're really part of that organization. Great question. Ds are the worst of all the DISC profiles. And let's just say this. You said it, I'll write about it. Ds are generally the bosses. Generally, DIs are generally the bosses. And if you are a boss, you're listening to this podcast, and you do not know what your DISC profile is, allow me to tell you, there will be a link as there is in almost every one of these podcasts, to a free, complimentary, not a cost DISC assessment. You'll get the full 37 pages of DISC assessment. You'll learn all about your strengths, all about your weaknesses, all about your opportunities, your communication style. You then will get a free consultation with one of us to go through and help you understand how to utilize this tool. If you are a high D, let us help you on how to adapt your approach to build the value that you're missing from your conversations with your people. Slow it down a little bit. You're going to be so much more successful if you involve your people. In high Ds, your propensity is to rush on with your own ideas. And that's okay. You probably have very good ideas, but you can have better ideas if you involve your people. So go to the link, get your free DISC assessment. We'll send it over to you. One of us will get back to you and schedule a free consultation. It's great. These guys are awesome. So click on the link in the show notes. It'll be right at the top. Make it really super easy for you. Make it happen for yourself. Do yourself the favor. Thank you for bringing that up. And because there are certain DISC profiles that are very open, like the high S's are very collaborative. Unfortunately, S's generally are not bosses, generally aren't.
And they're most of your people.
Most of the people.
It was 70% of the population, but it's probably barely double digits, the percentage of makeup of managers, because because they just don't get noticed for making things happen through other people. Great at being part of a team and supporting the team, but they're not the people that go make stuff happen. That's the Ds, and that's the one that the bosses get attracted to because they get stuff done. So
Vaughn, would be fair to say that is if you're that high D boss and you're out there, whether you're on the floor of your factory, whether you're out visiting your stores, whether you're on the floor of your dealership, that you might want to really reach out to those high S people, because they're not going to, those employees aren't going to talk to you. They're not going to volunteer this stuff. You probably have to ask them and then be prepared to. I always had a hard time with this because I hate to say I'm one of those Ds, but I would have to shut my mouth and say, okay, John, you're just going to sit here and listen with two ears, talk with one mouth, and take something in here. So that as a D, you're going to have to elicit that information out of your folks and be patient with them, right?
Yeah, you're going to have to use a lot of open-ended questions, John, because they're not necessarily going to just to talk to you quickly with that stuff. You're going to have to dig in a little bit, to your point.
Especially if you haven't done it in the past.
Yeah.
High S's are noted for their reticence for conflict or confrontation. They can be fairly passive aggressive in avoidance of any kind of things they can say or do that might erode some relationship or friendship that they have with somebody. So they are not volunteering. They're not proactive in sharing their thoughts, ideas, opinions. So during your free consultation with us, we will teach you the questions to ask the S's and the C's on your team to get the responses you're looking for, the best practices, the protocols to continue getting this input so that you do it right without a bunch of trial and error. We'll save you making the mistakes. We'll get you set off on the right foot the first time. And if you want to be a great leader, if you want to move your numbers, if you want satisfied employees, you want satisfied customers, you want to build in the elements that will keep you in business and thriving in your business. One, you need to understand yourself, you need to understand your people, but you've got to listen to your friggin' people. And it's all about asking questions. They've got the answers. Eric, I know you probably got another thing or two to add to this. Any last points before we wrap this puppy up?
I have a couple of thoughts here, but it was more about the first phrase you mentioned, which is lead with your ears, or listen with your ears, lead with your ears. I think it's a point. I used to say this. I just realized popped in my brain. I used to call it athletic ears. It seems crazy. It's a weird word, athletic ears, lively, listening to people talk. And it used to you would notice they had something to say when you had those conversations, because what happens is the folks had a boss that were in front of you, and they didn't always want to say exactly what was happening. So you have to figure out how to get them when they're able to speak, because there probably were S's. Now that I look back at it, they wouldn't say it right away, but then you let the lead go somewhere and you come back and have that conversation with that person with athletic ears, or listen with your ears, lead with your ears. And I think that is, without a fact, is probably the number one piece that a great leader does. If you want to change the way things are going, you absolutely have to lead with your ears. It's a concept that I've been doing, I didn't realize I was doing. I still do it.
Good for you. And here's another point that I don't want us to miss. When you're asking as a boss, your boss's boss, and you're asking these questions that you value their opinion, not only do they feel really good about themselves, there's a sense of pride and connection that takes place with that. They look up to you more.
They do.
There's nothing bad that can come of that.
It's pure
So-
appreciation. On appreciation does pour out with that on both ends. It's, if you ever want to change, I think we mentioned it enough, of all the different type of products that were out there in any kind of industry that you're in. I tell you, it's so fast moving. If you go to your competition, figure out what they're doing, thinking about what's going on in life around, and really, we had a little line called a learning journey. There's an idea out there to continue to learn while you're going, and your journey that's out there in business for product wise, because it's out there. Somebody's doing something, always something super cool, and that you can bring into your own business or your own product. So it's something, keep your eyes out there from the media out there comparatively, or just boots on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah. Great point. And I was thinking, as you were saying that, we spent a little bit, we were a little heavy handed on the retail side because that's really our experience, but it could go to any other industry. And one that just popped in my head, and I don't know why, as you were speaking, look at all the restaurant chains.
Oh,
right. Now, forget about COVID affecting a lot of people.
A lot of them.
This has happened to me, and John, you remember this place, El Adobe in Sarasota, Florida, one of the best Mexican restaurants on the planet back in the day. I'm living in California. I didn't know what Mexican food was until I moved to California, but it was good Florida Mexican food. And El Adobe had a line out the door every night, starting at 5 o'clock. That place was packed all the time. They sold it. Mama retired, sold it. The new owner came in. Did they just pick up where Mama left off? No, he was smarter and changed everything. And guess what El Adobe is now?
Probably a car wash.
A parking lot.
yes.
And it went quick. It went quick.
Yeah.
But it's, listen, come on, you've got something good. Don't, and here's the point I was lamely making, is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You're always looking for improvement, always looking to do things better, but know what you're doing well and understand why that works so well and why you don't want to change that. John, you got something on your mind.
The thing I was going to say is listen, I think for all the leaders out there, listen to your folks. Okay. As Eric said it, and I'll just use my term, use 2 ears, 1 mouth. So listen more than you talk. But the other thing is to listen to your customers. So if you have the ability to talk to them in interface with them somehow without a bunch of layers in between you, you can get some good feedback from them too. Because I bet if those folks at El Adobe, just made me think of this, those folks at El Adobe were asked why they're not coming, what do you think of the changes? They would probably have told you that they weren't in favor and they're not coming back. So I think that's the other piece too, is just make sure that you're taking care of the customer too and listening to what they're, because sometimes objections are a good thing because you can learn a lot. Or as a salesperson, person's turning, they don't want to buy something, find out what, overcome their objections, learn what the objections are.
Yeah, I had a great friend, still have a great friend, who's in the restaurant business, and his family's been in it for over 30 years. It's a rib place in Southern California. And most of his business was really in-house. So the customer came in the house, and prior to this COVID, I know everyone had to pivot outside, pivot through, whatever you need to do. He thought and rightfully, he needed to get out to the community even more. So rather than having the community come in, he went out into the football to catering system. And now his catering business, sorry, Dave, I got to say this, but it's probably double of what his indoor business is. And he went out and reached out. He had 4 walls, but he actually made it no walls. And I think that's just another business side. He saw something, he pivoted, and that's what you have to do.
Looking through the
And it's such a great point. And it certainly COVID changed the landscape of the restaurant industry. But there's a whole new metric, which is pickup and delivery, that barely existed prior to COVID. And it certainly has grown significantly. It has changed how America eats and orders food. Those who were quick to the change are successful today. Those who were slow to the change, they're probably gone. I'll tell you the idiocy of some business owners. At the beginning of COVID, I was engaged to work with and build a new sales team for a software guy who he'd built an algorithm, he'd built software that could go scrape the internet of your menu items, the pictures of your menu items, and build you an online menu that did not cost you a dime. It was free, zero cost. You customers could go to your website, start using his tool with your full menu and pricing on it in 72 hours. You are in business. It cost you not a dime. All he asked to do was to pick up the merchant services fees for just the online orders. And it was a very competitive merchant services fee. And he made his money off of his split with the merchant services provider. He was a really brilliant guy. I put together a sales team. We started hammering restaurants all across America, and 90% of the people, and we only called companies restaurants that did not have an online ordering mechanism. If they had it, although they were paying exorbitant fees to Grubhub and DoorDash and Uber Eats, they paid exorbitant. There was no fees, zero fees, absolutely free. It was a setup charge. That was it. 90% who had none of this business said, no, I'm not interested. That's not something I need. It's free. And they wouldn't even do it. That's how hard-headed some business owners could be. So before we wrap up, one of the things we talked about last week that I thought was important, you two were making the point that, and it was made again today, business changes. Business is always changing. The competition's changing, the product's changing, the economy's changing, software is changing. Fashion is changing. And when you're in the fashion industry, and again, back to the graveyard of retailers that I've worked for, 100% of them went out of business because they didn't keep up with changes. Fashion changes constantly. Restaurant business, the demands of the consumer. And again, whether you're selling rocket ships or selling plumbing, it's changing all the time. You got to keep up with the changes. You know what doesn't change? Leadership. That hasn't changed in decades and decades. Good leadership will help you overcome any challenges you face. You just have to get educated on how to be that good leader. And while I'm speaking on that topic, come on, people, $47 a month. You can start taking our online courses, get all the tools we're talking about all the time during this podcast. Again, I've got a link in the show notes. Try it. There's no obligation. There's no contract. Quit the next day if you think it's BS. You won't. Out of 800 and something people that have joined it, I think I've had one drop out in the first year. People are finding value out of it. You will too. Go to the link, take a look. There's 14 courses in there, including your free disc profile. Learn how to collaborate with your employees, how to have difficult conversations, how to deal with difficult people, how to have effective meetings, how to conduct a performance review, everything you need in the way of tools and knowledge to be an effective leader is in that course. $47 a month. Come on, that's less than what you spend on Starbucks, people. So come on, get with the program, join up, get the knowledge, and start becoming a better leader. Leadership can be and often is learned. The three of us all learned, right?
Yes.
And we can teach
We
it.
just had good people to teach us,
Right.
and we think we can teach you. So please join us, contribute, and invest in yourself and become a better leader. I'm going to wrap this up. Any final words, John Karwacki?
No, just as Vaughn said, leadership is something that you can learn. If you don't know it already, take the DISC assessment, learn about yourself. And if you take us on, we can teach you, but also we can teach you about your folks too, if we get them taking DISC assessments. But when you get out there, talk to everybody. Talk to your managers, talk to their employees, talk to the new employee that would make their day. And that's what millennials want these days. They want to be heard, seen and heard. So make it a point. Make it your point starting today, starting tomorrow. Make a difference. Eric?
Right.
Good words, John. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, I think this is the last thing. I'd like to give a shout out to Kylie in Australia, my new person, the person I'm coaching right now currently.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome aboard, Kylie. We love you.
We do. And I just want to say, listen, we can do a lot for you. I know from my past experience, John's past experience, obviously, the brother man, Vaughn here, his past experience, we have a lot to give you guys, and we're here to do it. We're really ready to do it for you. So again, thanks so much for the time here, Vaughn. I love the business mechanic. I love being part of being a mechanic. And I know John does.
Hey, let me say one other thing if we have a second is, excuse me, and this is true story. 3 weeks ago today, I was laying on the beach in St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay. I was retired. And then I spoke to these two fine gentlemen, my friends and colleagues, Vaughn and Eric, and they told me about what was going on and the opportunity to work with you, our listeners. And I got to say, I'm thrilled. I was so excited about these tried and true methods and the topics in helping you folks out that I came out of retirement to be here to work with you all. So I'm glad to be here. So thank you guys for bringing me onto the team, and so looking forward to working with you, our listeners of the Business Mechanic podcast. So that's all I have to say. But again, this stuff works. I've been through it myself, and I can say I'm an example. It works.
Yeah, you relate to it because it's what you and I were taught in the 80s and changed a bit. And certainly we've modernized it a little bit, but thanks for that, John. Good words. Thank you all for listening as always. We'll be back next week with a whole new topic, and we'll be with John and we'll be with Eric, and we'll have another great discussion. Come on, join us, y'all. We'll talk to you again soon.